There's two readings today. The first is from Thomas Berry and Brian Swim's The Universe Story. And if this whole conversation about these sermons is of at all interest, real to you, this is the most poetic and moving book that I've ever dealt with that tried to deal with the story of the universe in non-scientific and relevant terms. And as an example, so here's this part. Yet another biospheric invention destroyed the Achaean, the first eon of the Earth's life. The earliest cells satisfied their hydrogen needs mostly by using the supply of rich nutrients created by the turbulence of the primal Earth. As the nutrients from the sea were used up, life mutated into blue-green bacteria that took hydrogen from the seas. But to cleave hydrogen from the water molecule is to send oxygen into the cybernetic networks of the planet. The powers of oxygen are among the most formidable of all the elements. Oxygen is in perpetual need of electrons and will rip them out of previously stable compounds, leaving instead an electron-hungry radical that will repeat oxygen's theft elsewhere. Whoa. As oxygen was released into the geologic cycles, it transformed the lithosphere, that's the rocks, and the atmosphere. It invaded the rocks and either removed elements from them or cemented itself to them, thereby changing the chemical nature of the land. Once the surface had been transformed, oxygen grew in strength in the atmosphere and disrupted its ammonia, its carbon monoxide, its ancient, previously irreplaceable hydrogen sulfide. As its work in altering the nature of the Earth's atmosphere neared completion, it hovered over the land and crept upon any new upwelling of molten rocks from the interior, quickly changing their chemistry as well. It goes on, I'm skipping a bunch. As once there had been a vast multi-level community of prokaryotic beings in intimate relationships, there were left scattered remnants, still under attack from a lifeless enemy, their own creation. With each passing day, the richness of the Achaean world faded still further. The first great eon of the biosphere's history ended in catastrophe. Oh, guys got carried away. I sometimes take my hand at writing. So I wrote this in 2000 when every day I watched them cutting trees to make the FedEx hub. It was written in January. A myriad of dancing dewdrops floated through the crisp Carolina darkness, looking for leafless branches and delicate needles to adorn before the brilliant sunshine could illumine their beauty. They remembered the winter of 2000, when multitudes of pines and hardwoods felt the winter's frozen presence surround their outspread branches, and the morning sunlight created a terrain of sparkling diamonds. That winter's water on its journey to nourish Piedmont citizens had the joyous opportunity to pause a day surrounding nascent buds with the protection from nighttime cold, and inspiring passing consciousness with glimpses of magnificent wonder. Sadly, as the raindrops fell today, they found only phone wires and microwave towers, or the wings of cargo jets on runways and tarmacs. Ice particles attached to what they could, but they knew the sun would find no splendor when it arose this year. Droplets pondered among themselves what value had been gained by exchanging all their purchases for straight, flat pavement and tall walls, hiding porous red clay and hastening their return to the salty seas. groundwater, and dazzling beauty lost to economically profitable ventures. In that winter with no trees, the universe's teardrops fell on hard, soulless surfaces. Yet hopeful for the future, they sought fissures to fill and crack, with the prospect of restoring trees to adorn on forthcoming journeys.
These pieces are called Distant Hillside, and I wrote it in 2004. And the accompaniment of Nelson's words on the internet.
Two kind of opening comments. I always have to check to make sure this thing doesn't turn itself off. So first of all, I know that sometimes in my sermons I mention people by name, and I just want to begin by saying if I ever say anything that offends you or otherwise, tell me. I'm apologizing now ahead of time. I'm not intending to do that. Now that being said, I do want to thank Kevin Thurm for roping me, doing his wife's dirty work and roping me into serving on the solid waste committee of the city. He approached me after church one day. Psst, why did you do that? And I was going to say no, but then I thought about this sermon, and I thought, well, geez, I better say yes, because that's what this sermon's about. What does the planet do with its waste? And so here goes this sermon. As you know, we've been tracking the history of the universe, and we've been trying to ask ourselves, what can we learn from the way the universe solves problems? And without trying to do the whole thing, so life started about 1 billion years after the Earth started, and pretty soon the little cells were hungry, and they'd eaten up everything around them, and there wasn't much left, and they started to be hungry. And I don't know how cells think. I can't imagine quite what's the internal dynamic of a cell. But one day some cell said, wait a minute, we got more sugar in here than we had a few minutes ago. What just happened? Well, a photon whizzing from the sun had done something inside the plant and inside the cell and broken some stuff apart, and the cell had a little bit of food. Oh, dang, try this again. Well, you know, the thing is, when anybody's successful with something, it propagates. I mean, cell phones propagate. Anyway, whatever's successful eventually propagates. Well, one by one, these cells, they had food. Now we got food. And so they subdivide, and now there's two of them. And then, well, pretty soon, but the problem is, what they didn't realize is oxygen comes out. A little puff of oxygen flew out. And on the first two guys, it wasn't too much of a problem. Nobody noticed anything. Here I have to mention Sid. Sid, writes science fiction stuff. Anyway, so I wondered what would happen if Sid imagined, there's CNN. Well, what if Sid imagined GNN, Galactic News Network, and they sent out reporters to fly around? And what would happen? They come by the Earth after about 1 billion years, and not much is going on, but we saw 2 little green dots. But we don't think that's... Well, and they come back 1 billion years later. Whoa, dang! That stuff's everywhere. And they also noticed now there's oxygen. And oxygen is a huge problem, as the reading from Thomas said. It's a mean little ordinary little hombre, and it was causing a lot of problems. So what was possessed a few cells to figure out? What if we figured out a way to use that oxygen that's out there, and instead of let it eat us up, what if we turned it into a source of energy? Whoa, well, you imagine some guys got fried trying that. You can imagine all the calamity. How many cells died trying to get a hold of an oxygen atom and failed? But a couple must have succeeded. And once they succeeded, they started to subdivide. And like I said, I don't understand cell psychology, but we have to try to imagine. That's what was going on. Cells were trying to figure out how to stay alive. Just like, you're trying to figure out how to stay alive. You're trying to figure out, what can I do to get to tomorrow? And each of us have that problem, and the cells had that problem too. So my point here is, twice, I've given 2 now big examples, about 1 billion years apart, when planet Earth faced a huge crisis. First, a crisis of starvation, and second, a crisis of pollution. And both times, disaster was averted by creativity. And what kind of creativity is that? And how does that apply to us today? That's what I want to try to focus on. Now, you can say, well, it's hard to make a jump from 2 little cells to a group like this or the city of Greensboro. Yes, it is. But where else are we going to learn? Are we going to just pick one of the people here and say, okay, you're the smartest person here, tell us everything we need to know? I don't think so. So, what can we learn from these 2 examples? And we could study them more, that's okay. Number 1, the solution to big problems is not just stop doing bad things. Where would the planet be if somebody had, if a bunch of, photosynthesizing cells, or if the non-photosynthesizing cells had said, hey dudes, we see what's happening here. Cut it out. No photosynthesis. Well, what would be the choice? Okay, we're going to, half of us die. Well, the choice is not just stop doing bad. The lesson here is figure out a new way of acting. Figure out a new way. And within the human sphere, new way means usually new ways of thinking and acting. It doesn't mean grow a new third arm. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about new patterns, new ways of thinking. So the first thing is that the easy answer when you see a problem is just to say, well, that's a bad thing, don't do it. Well, that may not be the best answer. It may be listened to. I'm not against just saying, that's bad, quit. That sometimes is the answer. The second thing is how you name the problem is an important part of how you find the solution. If the little cells say our problem is not enough food, then that's one thing. But if they say untapped energy resources, well, then we start looking for energy resources. How do we catch those wispy little photons? So how you name the problem is an important part of how you find the solution. And we have to be real careful in this day and age about that. Third, the solution to huge, big problems from the perspective of the planet is try something new, really new. Try a different way of thinking about things. Try something new. And along with that is failure. A lot of, whoever's trying new stuff is going to fail. A lot. And the failures don't get recorded, and in the long history sweep of history, we don't see them. But there's a great line in one of some old management gurus' things. If you want to eat like an elephant, you got to shit like an elephant. With that, that's a kind of a gross way to say if you want to have a big elephant, it's going to make a lot of mistakes. You got to be willing to fail, but you got to think of new solutions. And lastly, times of unrest, times of chaos, confusion, and no food, no energy, rampant pollution, all those times are times of great creativity, and they portend a new future. And we're in one of those times today. And the fear is, oh no, this is a bad thing. We should try to get out of it. No, we should try to get through it to the other side in a new kind of way. Now, I wrote a note to myself. Well, I didn't write it, but I meant it. Say you're stepping on thin ice. So I'm stepping on thin ice here. But I'm going ahead. Worst comes to worst, I'll pay the price some way. So I want to talk about 4 kind of big problems that are facing us as a planet. They get politicized, and that part of my dilemma is that I don't think anybody has real good answers. No matter whether you voted this way, voted that way, or didn't vote at all. So, 4 things. Some time ago we pointed to global warming. A lot of people thought, well, what do you do if global warming in the winter doesn't sell very well? And we've changed the name of that, and global climate change is probably a better name. There again, name is important. We're facing global climate change. Then there's a lot of talk right now, we just mentioned it in announcements about immigration. I think the immigration problem is misnamed. This is really in the United States, we have an America's refugee problem. I'll come back to that in a minute, but that changes the way you think about the problem. There are people who are living in places that are uninhabitable, and they want to come live where it's habitable. That changes the way you think about it. It's a big conversation about jobs. Jobs, got to have more jobs. Well, yeah, but the bigger issue here is how do we function as a global economy and global trade, and how do we get resources going back and forth? This is a huge problem that's not very well thought through. And the 4th note I made to myself was guns. And there's just too many people, in my opinion, there's too many people getting shot. But when you say we want gun control, And, oh, no, we can't control guns. So what if we started to talk about responsible gun ownership instead of gun control? What's it mean to be a responsible gun owner? Then we can have that conversation. That's a different question. So what I was trying to say is, in these big categories, first of all, we have to think about what do we call these things? What do we call them? Because how you talk about them affects how you think about them, and how you think about them affects how you go about solving them. And these are thorny issues that the easy solutions, if these were easy problems, they would have been solved a long time ago by somebody less competent than we are today. And we're the most competent society that's ever been on the planet. We have more tools, more interconnection, more lucidity, and more creativity than the planet has ever known. So we got to solve these. And we got to try things. So I'm trying to figure out how do we deal with these kinds of stuff. And one of the ways is I think we have to start by looking at ourselves and our own local situation. I was thinking about this problem of people wanting to come here, so refugees and stuff. So I was just trying to take a survey. Let's just take Greensboro. So how many people have lived in Greensboro all their life? Okay, 3. How many people came in the last 20 years? Okay. And how many people came in the last 5 years? Okay, see, now what had happened, I thought, I came here about 25 years ago, and I was kind of hoping that nobody else would come. The part of the reason we came is it wasn't too big, and we loved the lifestyle, and the people were all friendly. Now, the Coopers came. Oh, yeah. But they're kind of like me, so we'll let them in, but, not those other people. So the question, many people in this room have traveled around the world, and we got to admit, Greensboro is a pretty nice place. The U.S. is a pretty nice place, and there's a lot of places that aren't a pretty nice place. In fact, there's a lot of places where, if I had to live there, I don't know how I would do it. There's other places I could figure it out. So we have to. So it's a problem that faces us here in Greensboro. How many people do you want to have here? Do you want to have 1 million people in Greensboro? Whoa, man! The Solid Waste Committee would have a big problem. So we have to start to look at things and ask ourselves, how does that come to us? And I'm going to come back around this one more time, so I want to say this. So what's the role of religious organizations in this? Religious organizations, I wrote down three things. One is we have to figure out the new stories to tell about life in the 21st century. So that's why we sang this little song, Don't Throw It Away. That's one of my favorite songs. Yeah, I sing that a lot. There is no away. If I tell you I say, Clemson, go away, where am I having him go? There is no away. There's the planet. We can't run people out anymore. We can say stay home, but that's still, anyway. So one is that religious organizations like us need to look at these problems and figure out where is the story that people are telling, an unhelpful story, and what new story can we begin to tell. So there's no such place as a way. Let's find a way to sing that song to somebody this week or something like that. Because there are people who are telling stories that are not helpful to us. And the only way to combat an unhelpful story is to tell a different story about it. And support compassion and support creativity and failure. We have to try to find ways as a religious organization. Part of our effort is to live out of this a compassionate heart. This congregation says finding meaning from a peaceful heart. And the question is, what does it mean? What does that mean, really, practically? Find meaning from a peaceful heart. Well, a peaceful heart, first of all, a peaceful heart doesn't mean go to sleep. It doesn't mean go to sleep, close your eyes, and ignore all the world's problems. That's not a peaceful heart. But it means to work together for justice and peace. My little mundane example, I've had a running battle with my bank and my insurance company over whether or not my house was insured. This has been going on for 4 months. They keep sending me letters. Your house is not insured, and you're working on it. And finally, I got a letter from the bank saying, we're charging you $274 for insurance on your house, which is not insured. Well, my house is insured. Well, it's a problem. It's a bureaucratic problem. So I asked myself, from a peaceful heart, well, I don't go into the bank and say, you swear at the bank manager. And I don't take a gun into the bank. That's not a peaceful heart. Now, it's a problem. I don't want to pay $274. But I have to find a peaceful heart solution to a bureaucratic mess. And it's a bureaucratic mess. It's taken 4 months to get some people in Denver and Dallas and Chicago who don't have a clue where I live and anything else. It's all solved. But how do you act from a peaceful heart? That's a little mundane example. It's mundane and it's sort of trivial. But it gave me a clue as to how to start from a peaceful heart. Don't get angry. It's not his fault. It's not his fault. We have a structural problem, so let's find a structural solution and act from a peaceful heart. How do we among ourselves begin to look at these big global situations, look within ourselves, and ask, how are we precipitating those problems? Global trade. How do we ask ourselves, when I decide I need a new cell phone, do I ask the quality of life that is being given to the people who mine the minerals that go into making the cell phone that I think I want cheap? Are they getting a fair wage? I don't know. I get this every time I go into a restaurant and the bill comes and I have to decide how much of a tip to make. This little guy, he's my waiter. I've met him twice at the same little restaurant. I know he's struggling hard to work hard to get a job so he can go to school, so he can get an education, so he can become an engineer. So how much tip do I give? That's a life-threatening question for me every time the bill comes. I don't want to give that much money. I've already paid too much. But it's places like that, colleagues, that you and I are touching those big global problems. And how it's important for us to be able to look at those big global problems, talk about how our actions are consciously or unconsciously playing into the hands of those same problems. And then figure out what do we do ourselves, and then you can generalize up. And each of these big global problems touch each one of us, is my suspicion. My contention would be another word. And so look at how try to look at these problems, and then we need to talk about them among ourselves. So when we get together on Sunday morning over coffee, instead of just talking about how's your garden growing, try to talk about where did you see global issues facing you as a personal problem. As you know, Mankoff and I here continue to have this conversation about whether you should eat meat on Monday. He's doing better than I am. I think he's ahead 2-1 now. But this is a problem because, frankly, friends, if the whole world decides to eat 8-ounce ribeye steak for dinner every night, the planet is sayonara. I mean, it's not going to make it. That's not a solution. And I don't know what you do to break that cycle, but you and I are participating in that just by the way you make your menu choices. And we have to learn how to look at our actions in that kind of light. Then, my second point, we need to learn to tell the universe's story. And this little story about oxygen and photons and all that. Let's say, listen, friends, the universe has been here before. The universe has had big problems. The universe doesn't back down. The universe moves forward. And I'm a part of a universe moving forward. And then let's learn from it. And let's tell our friends. So, and we also, part of our role of a group like this is to try to think outside of the old boxes. The human species is really good at doing today what we did yesterday. And doing today better than we did yesterday. The same thing. That we're really good at. Coming up with new out of the box. Think out of the box. How do we get new ways? But the key is we have to know what the problem is that we're trying to find a new solution to. And that's important too. It's not just something different because you want something different. It's something different because you want to solve the fundamental problems that are facing the planet today. And it's not just about saving the planet. That's not what we're about. I want to say that over and over again. We are building a new future for the planet. We are building a new future. It's not good enough. The planet has never been interested in keeping the same. The planet has been moving forward, and it is moving forward now. And for me, the key to that is the planet is looking for ways that the human species and all of the non-human species can work together so that both flourish. It's sort of like the little green plants and the little oxygen breathers working together, not against each other. And we have now on the planet a human sphere that is a new thing on the planet in its interconnectedness and its scope and its creativity and its range of effectiveness. So it's time to change our story, to stand up, try new things, and to begin to tell the story that we are here working to build a new future for the planet, to take it into a new time when humans and non-humans work together for mutual enhancement. So we can share among ourselves. What are little things you're doing? We can, and if you fail, then fess up about it. And speak out. Go to places. Talk to your friends. Tell them, we're trying to build a new future. And it's groups like this that do make a difference. It's like some cells were the first to try photosynthesis. Some were the first to breathe. And when history gets written, it'll say that we can ask ourselves, what's it going to say about a group like us? Maybe it'll say, This was one of those groups that found ways to break old patterns and invent new ways of living on planet Earth. And I hope to be part of that. Thank you.